how society used to give social capital to people has totally changed. So I'll give you an example, right? Like, I'm 37, I just turned 37. You're probably somewhere around 37, a little bit
48.
older, 48.
Yeah.
But when we were growing up, right, the framework of values was, okay, you study hard, you keep your head down, you go to school. Once you graduate from high school, you go to university, get a degree. Maybe you should get 2 degrees. Then you should get a job. Then you should save money, have a 401k, save for a house, buy a condo, have a car. And all these things were little ways of signaling to people that things were working, and you'd get social capital for it, right? People would walk around and introduce themselves and say, oh, I went to Harvard Business School. And you and I were supposed to say, oh my God, HBS? That's amazing. You must be a really important, powerful person in the world. And you would get social capital. But now, structurally, all that shit's out the window. Nobody cares. Or probably more rationally, fewer people than ever have cared, and fewer people are caring about that stuff. So take a couple of simple examples. The number of people going to college is way, way down. And it's a trend now that you can see, and it's getting replaced by this idea that, hey, you know what, if I have some reasonably useful skills, that's just as important and probably more important than getting a degree, and I don't have to be in debt, and I don't have to have the stress of how am I going to pay this off, and I don't have to have some crappy job and know that I went to school for 4 years to have a crappy job. I can have a crappy job with, you know, a couple of months of education. I mean, I'm making fun, but, you know, so that's something that's happening. If you look at ownership rates of houses,
or you can get educated online now.
Well, this is my point. I mean, like, why would you go to school to learn to code at Carnegie Mellon, at grade school, or University of Waterloo, where I went to? And why would you spend tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars when you can go to Treehouse and learn every single framework you need to learn, and learn it for $30 a month or less, and they'll get you a job, and they'll help you get, you know, retrained, and they'll make you stay relevant. Why wouldn't you do that? And if it can work for coding, which is sort of like the unit of value for Silicon Valley on top of which trillions of dollars of value is created, I presume it can probably work for a whole bunch of other, you know, blue-collar but also quasi-white-collar, blue-collar work. And the problem historically is we didn't give that enough social capital for it to work, right? We would look down on people that went to college and not some really fancy university. Or we would look down on someone that went to community college versus college and all the way down, right? You would pass the buck down. That's not true anymore, right? You're seeing people who didn't even go to school start the most important companies in the world. You're seeing them hire people not based on where they went to school, but their ability to solve coding questions or other problems or demonstrate their ingenuity in other ways. That's awesome, right? And so that's changing. You look at like ownership rates of houses in the US. That's completely crashing through the floor. Everyone's renting. You know, you look at ownership rates of things like simple like cars. Even that's changing when you look at usage patterns of things like Uber and other forms of transportation.
And it's going to dramatically change in my son's lifetime, right?
100%.
With self-driving cars.
100%.
Because he's not going to own a car.
Exactly. But here's the point. All of those things that used to be ways of signaling are gone. So the really interesting question is, well, what are they replaced by? So to me, that answering that problem is a really interesting problem.
Do you agree with like Jeremiah Owyang, who calls it a collaborative economy? Or?
Well, so I think that's trying to put a veneer, a superficial interpretation on something that's profoundly more sociological. Like this is like, for example, that doesn't explain ownership rates, or it explains why you want to use Airbnb. But it doesn't really explain why you'll take all your free cash flow and use it to plan Burning Man and spend it there, or go to EDC, or spend $10,000 at Hakkasan. It doesn't explain that. What explains it is a fundamental reallocation of value. Because now in this world where we live in a visually stimulating environment where you're supposed to capture your memories and get external validation in places like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, where you're spending 90% of your time anyways, and where you've been told and you've been trained that that's where social value starts and stops. You react to what they reward. And so you're much better off as a 25-year-old guy spending $5,000 at Hakkasan and getting awesome pictures of you and some models and posting it and getting 500 likes than you are renting a Prius or leasing a Prius. So instead you'll just take an Uber to the airport, right? Do you see what I'm saying? So all of these simple things, they start off, by the way, in these very superficial ways, but they have much more deep-seated ramifications in 10 or 15 years when it's all said and done. So to me, that's one big trend. The generation
Are we building